Oh, hello. Um, all right. Well, I am going live by myself on purpose because I really love this book, Ensoulment. It's my favorite book that I ever read in my life, and it was written 2,000 years ago by Porphyry of Tyre about how the soul enters the body. And so, we never get a chance to talk about this book. So I'm just going to read kind of quotes or paragraphs from it and then discuss. If you're here and you're in the chat and you want to actually get in the video room, just chat me and I'll give you the link to get in the video room. We can discuss. Or if you want to pick a page or something randomly, I will read from there. um, okay, well, I'm just going to read from page 24. Let's see what it says. Plato uses one of these terms in the following excerpt. In the generational commingling that occurs in the human animal, there's a sharing of two natural essences, a combining of form and appearance. There's also a mixing of aesthesis, just as with any other plant or animal. So here he's talking about how in any ensoulment, there are two essences that combine into the third essence. That would be the essence of the father and the essence of the mother, and they combine in form and appearance. And but there's also a mixing of aesthesis, which is the aesthetic sensibility, like they would call the sensory apparatus of a human, the aestheterion, which is the aesthetic soul senses machine. And so the chart was said to be the like represent how your senses are meant to sense the world. Like if you take two people and you put them in a restaurant, a Scorpio might notice the hot waiter and the Cancer might notice the food on the menu, and that's because they have different soul senses machines, and that's the aesthetic, sensory apparatus. So what he's saying here is there's a mixing of aesthesis, just as with any other animal or plant. um, so it's not just that the essences of the parents combine, but the aesthetic sensory apparatus of the parents combine. Okay, so he says, previously Plato mentions the topic of trees and seeds. Humans are different than use different senses than do plants. They also have a unique set of yearnings altogether, as plants and humans find differing things useful. So in this book, the author Porphyry of Tyre endlessly compares humans to plants. In fact, he says that humans are a roving plant, and that the human is like a plant in as much as it needs food, water, sunlight, and air. So whereas the plant gets sunlight from photosynthesis, we get sunlight through the eyes and it goes down the spine. Plants get food from the soil underneath, and the human puts food in its mouth, and that's where the soil comes in, or the food, and then we get air through our nostrils, and then. So anyway, they would say that the human is a roving plant. It's a plant that walks around. So this is, according to Plato, embryos have a sensory experience and a set of yearnings, as do fully animate beings. He uses the same vocabulary to refer to plants. So Porphyry refers to Plato a lot because he was a Neoplatonic philosopher. He was a philosopher that had learned from Plato, and so he carried on the work of Plato. Um, he says Plato refers to the mixing that occurs within natural creatures. Here's a quote from Plato. The third portion of the soul takes form between the front and the navel. The front, I think, is up here, or the chest. I think the chest is the front, and then the navel. So he's saying like the third part of the soul is here. This is the area in which the logical capacity is fixed. Within this framework, there's no mixing between the noetic mind and the logical mind. So these are different kinds of mind, parts of the mind. The noetic mind, noesis is like intelligent understanding or the thought process of ideas. And I think the noetic mind lives up here, where whereas the logical mind is kind of a different. So they're kind of analyzing the soul in different parts. He says the senses of pleasure and pain work together within the passionate parts. So that was just a quote from Plato. Let me actually read it again. The third portion of the soul takes form between the front and the navel. This is the area in which the logical capacity is fixed. Within this framework, there is no mixing between the noetic mind and the logical mind. The senses of pleasure and pain work together within the passionate parts. Okay, so I'm just reading random quotes from the book, just randomly throughout, just so you can kind of get a feel for what is talked about in the book. Okay, now I'm moving to page 30, where it says, because the baby has not been born yet, we cannot gain any insight into such questions by plotting out the urges in terms of the outside influences. So they talk a lot about the urges. There's a word for it. It's called hormesis, from which we get hormones. And they said that each person or baby or soul has a hormesis, which is a set of urges. And so he's talking about the urges in terms of the outside influences, and we would say this is definitely the planets and the celestial influences influencing the urges. We don't think about that a lot. People are always like, I have PMS because of hormones, but we would say you have passionate Mars syndrome because of Mars moving and bringing iron through the ether, and that is the outside influences affecting your urges. So in this essay, we see that the urges are actually affected by the celestial influences. Um, okay, it's saying, at this time, I find it necessary to make a stand against idle talk and nonsense. And yet, I would like to contribute the possibility of a sympathetic fantasia, which is a shared vision between embryo and mother. So the fantasia realm was taken very seriously by the Greeks. We get the word fantasy from fantasia. In Greek, it was spelled with a phi. It's like Phant. Here, I'll type it in the chat. Fantasia is spelled like this, and they like the Greeks took the fantasia realm very seriously. This is a world of visions. So, according to the Greeks, you can send out a fantasia, like in manifestation theory, we send out visions. And you can also receive a fantasia, let's say from your spirit guide or something, or in a dream, you get a vision or a fantasia. And so that is what this is saying is there's a shared fantasia between mother and embryo. This makes me think of when I was pregnant, a day before my daughter was born, the roof of my house had leaked all over the house. And I had this dream, and in it, my daughter said, Mom, I'm ready to come out. And I said in the dream, can you wait till Monday morning? The roof is collapsing. This happened in my dream realm. And she came out Monday morning. And according to this book, they would say that the fantasia realm, the baby and the mother share these visions. And that's why, mothers dream about their babies a lot. They get messages. If you talk to any mother, who's listening, they would get messages from their baby. So that's what he's talking about. So he says, a sympathetic fantasia would exist if the mother's visions were combined with the images from the incoming soul. There are no doubt many facets to the making of an embryo. Now, I just want to acknowledge how this text is so pivotal and interesting because, there's not a lot of modern stuff written about how a mom can get visions from her baby. Maybe psychics say that, but this was just a Greek philosopher saying that you know, I actually, to be even more extreme, I actually had a vision of my child before I ever met her dad. I actually had a vision coming in that there was a baby coming in, and then I looked in my chart and I timed it to December 10th, 2007, and I told a bunch of people. I mean, I have evidence for this. I told a bunch of people. Then I met her dad at a party, and I was like, "This is the father of my child." I just knew it, and she came out on December 10th, 2007. So I actually had visions that came in before I even met the father of my child. And according to this book, it would say that they're sent by the embryo. And a lot of women experience this, that they get visions from a child somehow. And so I think in Ensoulment that is actually addressed. I think that's real interesting. Okay. Here's another paragraph. Women are highly involved in the process of fertilization. They are the ones to open up the bosom and allow entrance in. Mothers often have access to thought pictures from future offspring and visions depicting great similarities to the child growing within. Similarly, it is because of such visions that a man might set out, working curiously to fashion a connection with a beautiful woman, as a horse or dove might do in seeking its mate. Men are drawn especially to women who are beautiful, causing them to look in the eyes to take in a memory of a countenance. A man might even insert a woman's face into thoughts of making children, mounting her in his fantasies and such. Sorry for the R rated. Uh, I have to stay true to the essay here, but we are at adult school here. Astrology is adult school, I believe. But anyway, I think with the larger meaning of what's being said here is that because the embryo is sending visions to the mother, men might pick up on that vision and then also vision about getting with the mother in order to make a child. Even if they don't know that they're there to make a child, there is a vision that comes to them. And a lot of this essay suggests that the baby sends visions down to the parents to get them together from the ether. In fact, in Platonic theory, they say that the soul sprouts its seed in the ether and then it comes down through the parents. So, I think modern scientific people think like sperm and egg make baby. And according to this more teleological ensoulment theory, baby's soul sends in visions, and then mom and dad go about creating a union of sperm and egg, which makes a baby. Okay, I'll keep reading. And yet, in the process of becoming a chorus leader to life, thoughts alone will not bring a full birth to fruition. The true manifestation of a new creature requires a joining of two seeds with visions presented from the fantastic parts of the baby's soul. So this is saying that visions alone will not create a baby. You actually need the sperm and the egg, the seeds to also come together that would make that baby. And so in this is one of the weirdest and most wonderful co-creations that we do is between you know baby and humans, soul and humans. The soul sends visions down here and says, I would like to come through, and then the humans here have to consent and make bring the seeds together to say, okay, the soul can now enter. So I mean, I think that's something really important to acknowledge, is that at another part in the essay it says, at no point does a soul just jump on you. I mean, there are unwanted pregnancies or surprise pregnancies, but um we know how to prevent those as well. So the humans do have some control about what souls and when souls enter. Okay. It said, could there not also be a melding of visions from the mind of each parent? At times, a disconnect could occur as no two people have the same sensory experience. None of us are living in the same tiny house. Each of us are bound to the heavens in our own unique way. This is where the chart comes in. It suggests that each of us is bound to the heavens through a sensory apparatus, that eistaterion, which is the soul senses machine. And in that, we each have a different sensory apparatus and way of sensing the world. So you could say in some ways that the soul is within us, but then we have this meat suit, this body that has this chart layer, which is the interface with which how the soul senses the world around us. And that changes how our soul acts, how it talks, what it does, and all that kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, that's just a thing. Okay. Let's keep moving to a different page. Okay. Now he mentions Timaeus, which Timaeus was I have a book on Timaeus in my studio. I was reading, it's a book from Plato is Timaeus. And he says, um so I think he's reading from Plato, and he says this topic is mentioned eloquently in Timaeus. Here's a quote. In order to start a new creature growing within, the gods have brought about a love of intercourse. Women must cooperate in the act of ensoulment. There's an animal within each of us, and it is the inner desires and urges that incite the act of genesis. Now, the chart was actually called Genesis. Sometimes we equate the chart with genetics, because when we, at least I do, when we say that somebody has a chart that's predisposed towards violence, for example, I would say that's very akin to saying you're genetically predisposed towards violence. And in that way, it's interesting that the chart is called Genesis. It also makes you think of the Bible, being called Genesis, and what makes you want to find the astrology in the Bible there, kind of thing. Okay, so there's an animal within each of us, and it is the inner desires and urges that incite the act of Genesis. The masculine and feminine come together within the mother, and yet living creatures are not generated simply whenever there is enlivenment, as is true of plants. Instead, true animation occurs when the self moving portion of the soul sinks downward. Okay, so according to Plato in Timaeus, it's said that the human has, or animals too, have a self moving portion of the soul, which we call autokinetics. And plants don't have this. Plants, well, some people say they move around, but they don't move in a roving fashion like an animal. And so, what Plato's saying here is that real animation occurs when the self moving portion of the soul sinks downward. And I think that we can think about quickening, which is when the baby starts moving, that is a lot of times when we think that the soul has sunk downwards, is now the baby is moving inside the mother, and that is kind of some ensoulment theory. So okay, now he goes on to talk about something called non-compliance. He says the topic of non-compliance by respectable creatures has been discussed in previous writings. Non-compliance has been defined as a self-moving creature not obeying its higher logic. Non-compliance was thought to occur because of the yearnings within the heart. For instance, a creature might attempt to control everything or present some other harsh behavior. It was thought that a truly autocratic creature would instead listen clearly and subtly to its bodily urges and then take action in accordance with higher principle. A self governed creature is led strongly by its visions and mental images. In this way, manifesting the life purpose is largely dependent upon the subtle act of hearkening the urges of one's own body. So, in teleological theory, we see a lot about life purpose. Like it says here that, we all incarnate for a life purpose. And, um, you know, it's basically saying that how we know our life purpose has a lot to do with listening to our own urges and listening to our um what our yearnings are, what our senses are, what we're noticing, what visions we see. A lot of ancient development theory has to do with what visions that you're shown. For example, how do we know if we're supposed to be an accountant or an astrologer? Well, it depends on, what visions you see. Like, here's an example. For about 10 years of my life in my 20s, I talked to Christians and they would say astrology is sacrilegious, it's against God, blah, 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 blah. And I thought, I love God, as we can see with my cross here that I wear. I love God. And so I was like, well, God, what am I supposed to do? What am I here to do? And I would see a vision that you're here to be an astrologer. And I was like, but it's against God. And I would get another vision of you're here to be an astrologer. And I did this for about 10 straight years. And every vision was I'm supposed to be an astrologer. And so finally one day I just accepted that that was my telos. That is what I'm here to do. But the point is according to Ensoulment and a lot of these ancient texts, our life purpose is set about in the seed. And as we grow, our purpose grows, within us and alongside us and is sent to us in visions. If a little kid says, I want to be a soccer player when they grow up, I listen because I think people think there's these things you should be a doctor and a lawyer, and those are the right things to do to make a good living. But we got to listen to the visions of these little kids. When they say I want to be a soccer player, I hearken that image and I say, okay, a soccer player is growing right now, because we don't know what's going to happen on the path of that. But definitely a bigger error would be to deny the kid its vision. Now, I suppose if we had a vision that was like not kosher or was anti-social, maybe we would try to resculpt the vision somehow. But definitely listening to our visions is probably very important. Well, it is just me here in this room, and I was, had planned to be here in case anyone wanted to show up and talk Ensoulment. But because it is just me, I think I'm going to close down the room. I hope you all enjoyed some quotes from Ensoulment. I love this book. I will be doing more Ensoulment jams. And if you want to discuss the book, then you can come in the room with me. If you want to find this book, it's on Amazon. And it took me 7 years to translate it from Greek into English. It was sent to me by a religious scholar in a zip file in my email. He said, "This is never been translated. Can you translate it?" No, there is another translation in existence that we found, but this is one of the only ones. So get yourself some Ensoulment. All right. Have a wonderful weekend.